All right, thanks, Ann, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Again, my name is Brent Bogar. Many of you probably know me as a former city commissioner in Williston. I own Jadestone Consulting, and this session I am working with the Greater North Dakota Chamber as a lobbyist. Last session I was with the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties as their lobbyist, which Williston, Williams County, and really all of Western North Dakota are part of. And so I've gotten to know probably a lot of you through various connections in one of those capacities. Today, I'm just going to go through, some of this may seem very basic, but I thought I would start at ground zero, as Ann titled this Legislative 101, so that's where we're going to start, and just talk about the process and how to get engaged and follow what is happening here in Bismarck for the next technically 77 days. We'll see what they do with the legislative calendar and what that really means, but basically till the end of April. So the agenda today, like I said, just going to go over a few things. We'll talk about the legislative branch, and then what that really is made up of and how that looks right now, the legislative process. And then we're going to jump into how to track bills and see what the bills are out there within the legislature right now. And then really the last part, and to me the most important part of today, is this last part of how to engage. What can we do as individuals, as organizations, to engage in the process? So the legislative branch is made up of the House and the Senate, is what most people think of. In North Dakota right now, our House has 94 members, of which right now 81 are Republicans and 13 are Democrat. That's why you always hear about the supermajority. In the Senate, there's 47 members with 38 Republicans and 9 Democrats. Again, supermajority on both sides there. Two other parts of the legislative branch, though, that don't get a lot of attention because they're not really seen getting the headlines. One is Legislative Council, and they really don't want the headlines. They're the behind-the-scenes people. They are the legal staff for the legislature. They are the ones that actually will draft the bills, make sure that it follows the right format, that it references the right sections in Century Code. They do the research to see if it's going to create conflict in Century Code somewhere else. They also have within Legislative Council their own financial analysts there. We know there's the state treasurer, there's the tax department, there is OMB on the governor's side within the executive branch. The legislature, through Legislative Council, also has their own financial analysts to look at fiscal notes and determine the cost of things and not just count on the executive branch. They have their own, basically you could say their own accountants. And then they also have support staff there for them, their IT support. All of the legislators have laptops and or iPads, and every session during the organizational session at the beginning, actually the first part of December when they meet, there are a lot of training sessions for them to learn how to use their iPads and laptops so they can stay engaged, and then you'll walk around the floor and you'll see them playing Candy Crush on their iPad. So, and then the last part is legislative management. And legislative management is actually 17 members, is a committee of 17 legislators. And that is basically the group of legislators that manage things during the interim process. Our session is only 80 days. And so for that next year and a half, really, who is things getting reported to? And that's legislative management. They are the ones that determine what studies are going to get done, which committees they get assigned to, and who gets assigned to what committees during that interim process. And so it's you could say it's a pretty big honor and privilege to be selected to serve in there. The majority and minority leaders both serve as part of that, and then they both get to appoint people to the legislative management as well. So that's what makes up the legislative branch. Now the next part, I was talking to someone earlier and I said I really wanted to find the Schoolhouse Rocks video of how a bill becomes a law, but just a little difficult to pull that one off. I mean, it's out there, but it's kind of choppy and whatnot. But this is really here just a simple flow chart on what happens with legislation, what Where does it start and how does it end? So our first step is the bill is introduced. Once it's introduced in either the House or Senate, bills can start in either chamber. It gets referred to a committee. And then that committee will hold a hearing, and they may have multiple hearings on a bill just depending on the depth of that bill. Some things are a 5-minute hearing, and some bills have 5 to 10 hearings that may be an hour to 2 hours at each hearing. After the hearings are done, the committee then will make a recommendation. The recommendations really are do pass or do not pass. And that will then go to the floor. And one of the committee members will carry that to the floor, introduce the bill, give the bill number, the short title and definition of the bill, maybe give a little bit of explanation of that bill, and then there may be floor discussion. Sometimes there are, sometimes they're not, and then it will go to a vote at the floor. And then from there, if it passes, it gets referred to the other house. If it fails, the bill dies, and it's done for the session, never to be heard from again. Once it crosses over to the other house, it's really the same process. It's referred to a committee. That committee will also have its hearings and then make a recommendation and go to the floor for action, whether it's a pass or do not pass recommendation, and then that floor action. From there, there are 3 things that can happen. If, let's just say the bill was originally introduced in the House, and then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate makes no changes to the bill that the House sent over, it is then passed and is sent to the governor for his signature or potentially for a veto, which then it would come back and we'd go through the veto override and all of that. The other option is it could pass, but the Senate made some changes. They may have said, we want something a little different in here. So then it gets referred to what's called a conference committee. And then that conference committee is members of both the House and the Senate, and they will meet and discuss the bill, discuss those changes, and determine what's going to be, in a sense, the compromise potentially, or which one is going to carry forward. Once they've determined that, it then actually has to go back to both the House and the Senate floor for reconsideration and a final vote if there was changes made to it. And then it would go to the governor. If it passes the first House, but then the second House, in this example, the Senate, does not pass the bill, again, the bill just dies like it did on the first side. So it went through the whole session, got to the very end, but then died on the Senate floor. Uniquely in North Dakota, all bills will be heard on the floor. In other states, they can be killed in committee. In North Dakota, all bills are given a hearing and all bills are given an up and down vote on the House floor or the Senate floor. So that's the process of how our legislature is made up and how it goes, their work that they do to pass the laws. Legislative tracking is the next piece to talk about so that we can actually track what's going on and how we do that. And this is really something, is not unique to North Dakota. I think North Dakota does a good job of getting everything online for people to follow. And so I'm actually going to tab over to the legislative's website. I have that URL up there on the screen right now, and we'll go through some of the basics of their website and then how to look into bills and the bill tracking. So here's the website. This is the legislative branch's website, their homepage. And so from here, there's a lot of different things that we can see. We can see basic navigation. I'll just walk through this very quickly. The Legislative Assembly, Legislative Council, we talked about who they are. If I go in here, I can find their contact information, more details. It gives you the century code of when they were founded and all of that type of stuff. Same with Legislative Management. News is just the basic news. It's not news releases from various legislators, but it's really just like when they've come into session. There's quite honestly, there's not a lot there. The calendar is just the basic calendar for the legislature. It is not the calendar that their daily work calendar. I just went into it now, it really just talks about here's where the session begins, when bills can finally be introduced or no longer introduced, those types of things. And then you'll see LD means Legislative Day 1, Legislative Day 2, 3, 4, 5. That tells you the actual legislative day. State Constitution states that they can only be in session for legislative days in 8 days. Now, they've made some headlines recently because you'll notice that the 4th and 5th are not legislative days. They were here working, but they were not counted as legislative days because they did not gavel in on the floor or the Senate. So they were just in committee hearings. But when they're not on the gaveled in, bills cannot be introduced either because they have to be heard on the floor and referred to committee. So there was that week, and actually this week then, there were not a lot of bills for hearings right now because it was really just the pre-filed bills that were filed by the agencies, the governor's budget bills, those types of things, not bills introduced by legislators. And so the calendar is starting to get a lot more full. I think yesterday there was just over 100 bills that were dropped between the Senate and the House. So it's going to get a little bit more busy. The legislature, going back to the homepage, video, I can go in and actually right now the House is in progress. If I click on this link right here, it will actually open up a video page and you can watch the discussion live from wherever you're at and see the House discussion, if there's debate on issues, all of that type of stuff. Same with the Senate. Right now the Senate is already out of session. They obviously had a short session today, and typically after their floor sessions they go back to committee hearings. But this is a really nice feature to be able to do, like when you're in Williston or Watford City, even for us, like myself as a lobbyist, sometimes I don't want to necessarily be sitting on the floor because there's only one bill that I really need to hear and I need to be catching up with other people, so I can see when it's on the agenda and just watch that from the hallways. I can watch it actually on my phone or whatever. So that's a very nice feature that is available. It's one of those things, I guess you could say, good for open government, good for transparency to be able to see that information. So getting into here, over here we've got our legislative assemblies. We are in the 65th Assembly, the 17-18 session is what it's considered. And so that's where I can actually click and it takes me to the 65th Assembly. And this is where I then can start looking and seeing, okay, over here, here's all of my members. I can look at House members, Senate, by district. So if you know the district you live in, Williston proper is District 1. The rural areas around that are District 2. And so you can look up who your representatives are by district. Also, just looking at the full chamber, this is kind of a neat one because you can say, I would just want to look at the Senate and I want to see all of the Republicans in the Senate or all the Democrats in the Senate. We'll do the Senate, Democrats, and apply. And like as you saw from the earlier slide, it's a small list right now. So I can see who they all are. So go back to the 65th Assembly, you can see leadership, committees. It's kind of your basic organization. But over here, Legislative Assembly, I have the interim, which would be this coming summer and into 2018, when all those interim committees that management, legislative management assigns their budget information. But right now we're in the regular session. So if I go to the 65th regular, there's more information. Again, it has the breakdown of who the membership is, the committees, but now I can see the Senate or House calendar. This is where I see what they're actually hearing for that day. What's on the floor, what bills are there. Committee hearings, this is updated. This tells me all of the committees that are that day, and I can see, track that. But now, this is where we start getting into the actual bill tracking. So I can see House bills and resolutions, Senate bills and resolutions. But really one of the easier things to do when you're first getting into it is not look at House and Senate, because they can introduce bills and you're trying to, was that bill introduced in the House or the Senate? But I know what it's about. is I can go to the major topics index. And this just gives me the major topics. So I'm just going to click down here and to W for Williston, and we can see Williston State College, for example. And if it's hyperlinked, you can see then that will take you to all of the bills that are associated that Williston State College has something in. In this case, there's 2 bills. This is a unique thing this session since the legislature did not accept the governor's revenue forecast and budget. We have the governor's appropriations bills from the agencies, and then the legislature actually introduced their own bills, which are basically the appropriations as they were in 15-17 after the allotments and agency cuts that were made. So each agency right now actually has 2 bills that they have to follow, and there will be potentially a 3rd bill or amendments once Governor Burgum introduces his budget, which we're anticipating in the next 2 weeks. So that's the major topics index. Quick way, if you do know a bill, no matter which page you're on within the legislative branch's webpage, if I know that bill number, I can just type it in right here and click enter, search for it. It pulls up that bill. I don't even know what, I just put in a random number. Here's the language. So related to hearing requirements for commercial vehicles and commercial and non-commercial driver's licenses. So you can just easily find that bill, like if, again, knowing this is sponsored by Williston, if Senator Beckedahl introduces a bill on behalf of Williston or a constituent or an organization up there, he's probably, once that bill is going to be introduced, he's going to let them know what that bill number is. Instead of them having to go through the major topics or the Senate list, they can just, you can just type in that Senate bill number right there. It's just a 4-digit number. House bills all start with 1, Senate bills all start with 2. They're 1000s and 2000s. Very, very basic in that regards. Now, if you're an organization and you're trying to track more, like the chamber, for example, you might not want to have to always go in and look up those individual bills. And so the last big part on their website that I'm going to take the time to go through is the legislative bill tracking system. And this is a pretty unique feature. You have to create a state login ID, which if you have done your driver's license online or something like that, you already have a login ID. So you can log in. And it takes you into a bill tracking system. And I'm just going to walk through the basics. I'm going to point out up front, right over here, there is a user manual available on every page that you can click on. It's a PDF document. It's about 60 pages long, and it walks you through screen by screen, basically, all of the different features. I'm just going to walk through some very basics so we can, you can understand how this works. You can see I already have a tracking list built for the Greater North Dakota Chamber, who I'm representing this session, and a number of bills. Right now it's at 49. That number will grow significantly over the list, over the session. But if you did not have a list, this part would not be there right now, and all you'd see is the search add bills or add shared list. Now the add shared list is a unique feature. If I create a list and I want to share, the Williston Chamber would like to track my list, I can share that with them, and when they log in, they can see all of my list. And if it's my list, I am the one in control of it. So if I add something or delete it, it's going to reflect in theirs. They cannot edit that list, but they would be able to keep track of what the chamber is tracking. And as we go through this, you'll see that there are places for us to put comments and descriptions, and so we can update that information through the list. So let's just do a search and add bills. And what I'm going to do very easy in the very beginning. There are a couple of things that you can do. You can search by bill number if you know the bill number. Again, if this is the first time that you're building your list, you probably are going to have more than one bill on a list. If you just have one bill, you may not necessarily use the bill tracking system. But you can obviously, but you might have multiple. As you saw right now, I'm at 49. Well, one way to do it is just click search with nothing filled in. It's going to pull up every bill that's there. So right now we're right around 500 bills that have been introduced. So we'll go back up to the top very slowly here. You can see when I'm here, I could actually select all and add those to my watch list if I wanted to watch every bill. You will be a glutton for punishment if you do that. But you can track it, put in the bill number. Another way to search for it is bill text. So again, in recognition of our sponsors, we'll put in Williston, do a search, and we can see there are 4, 5, 6, 7 bills that Williston is somehow named in. And so if I just want to track what's available in Williston, and we're just going to run with this for the example, I'm going to select all for that, and I'm going to say track bills. So every bill that Williston is named in. Now I could add that to my GNDC list, but that's not what I'm tracking here, so I can just put in Williston. Check that that's where I want those to go. If you have multiple lists, you can add them to multiple lists. So I could add those to the GNDC list as well as the Williston list. I do not want to do that. I want to keep these separate. So as you see, here's the bills, the title. I can give it my own description beyond the title because the title can be a little, I don't want to say misleading, but not as clear as it could be. And then I could add comments. You know, for example, and I'll use House Bill 1255 for an example because I'm familiar with this bill. What it is going to do is increase the legal limit on certain highways in the state from 105.5 to 129,000 pounds. It is the reason Williston is listed in here because it's specific that it's to Highway 85 and Highway 2 and just certain sections of those two highways, along with Highway 83, part of Highway 52, and the interstates. It's very specific as to which it is, and it's all part about moving commerce across state lines. Other states have already gone to 129,000 pounds, so this is just kind of right there. So I could put in the description, 129,000 pound load limit for 2 and 85. A little bit better description as to what that is, and then I could put a comment in. You know, as Williston, do we support that or not? You know, I could just say, strongly support for commerce and less trucks. Because obviously if they can haul 129,000 pounds, it means more can be on a single truck, so it means less trucks on those highways. Again, just on the note of that, again, this is just to U.S. highways. It does not impact the state highways or the county roads. So anyone that's on here from the counties, if this were to pass and they're on the state US 85 coming up and they get off on a county road, they still have to get an overweight permit at the 105 and above. So make sure that that's clear on that bill because, like I said, I have been familiar with that bill and have worked on the permit system for a number of years. So anyway, all I have to do once that's done is click add, and now that list is there. One feature that was just added this session, and I'll go over a little bit later, is this feature. Now that I've created this list, I can add it to my mobile device. They have an app that's available for an Android or iPad or iPhone, and you can you have to register that app or that device with within the system, have the app loaded, and now I can assign that so that this can actually be tracked. I will see this on the app. So if I create a list to track, now I can see that. What it will do within the app is show me all of the hearings related to that, what this calendar is, where those hearings are, what room they're in, that type of thing. So now we've created that list. I can go back to the tracking list. Here's Williston. I've built my tracking list. I can view it, edit, delete, share it. So just Obviously, we just viewed it. I'll click in there. You can see it. If you want to view the bill, you just click on here. It's going to open it up in a new window in a PDF for you to read. You can see I created my own description and comments. Again, you can view, edit, delete. Maybe once the bill's done, you want to delete it to keep your list clean, you know, those types of things. If we go back to our tracking lists, if I want to share this list, I click share. All I have to do is, here's the list name and the code. So I would send that to, say, the Williston Chamber or Williston Economic Development, that list name and that code. So I go back to my tracking lists. If I want to add a shared list, I put in the name and that code, and then it will be added to my list to be able to track. So it's a pretty cool feature, especially if you're working with additional organizations. Like for Williston Economic Development, you're probably also working with ED&D, the state's economic development. They may have a tracking list that you could actually be able to add to within your system to track there. So it's a very nice way to track, especially when you've got a lot of bills. The other thing that you can track in here is standing committees. So from my standpoint with the North Dakota Chamber, these 4 committees are committees that obviously are going to deal with the business environment. So I have these committees on my watch list. Again, I can now look and I can see their calendar, those committee hearings. If I click on committee hearings, see, do I want to just see my tracking list or do I want to see one of these committees? So if I click on GNDC and I select the date range, and we're just going to say for today, select 2 bills that are on our watch list that have hearings today. One was at 10:45 and one at 1:30 this afternoon. So I can see those committee hearings. Again, going back to the committee hearings, if I want to see everything that's in House Finance and Tax, here's the bills that were there for today. So it's a nice way to keep things organized instead of having to look through everything by building these tracking lists. The last part that I just want to touch base on, because I have mentioned it, is the manage the mobile devices. Since this is new this session, the app, go to the App Store, you download it, and then you have to actually add a device. Now again, if you're an organization like GNDC or the Williston Chamber Economic Development, I can have one person managing this tracking list, but I can add multiple devices. So I can go in here and I can add that device name and put that in. So, you know, for example, Andy Peterson is the director here at the Greater North Dakota Chamber. He's been out of town, so I haven't added him to our tracking list yet, but I can add his device so that we all, through GNDC, see the same tracking list, the same calendar. It's a very handy way to manage that and manage those devices. So it's a really nice feature. The app, I think, will continually get improved because it's out there. There is a gentleman in Legislative Council that is continuing taking comments on, you know, ideas for the app. Quite honestly, the app is actually easier. Once you've got your tracking list built, you just use the app. I mean, obviously, as for right now, as bills are continuing to get dropped, it's a little bit more challenging because you got to go in. You can't add them in the app. You have to go in through the bill tracking system to add them. I would guess that in the future we'll be able to just do that right through the app. But I give the state a lot of credit for the development of this app, and their first go around. It is very, very good. It integrates with your calendar on your phone. So I can actually go in, see a hearing, and it will say, add to my primary calendar. It will add it to your calendar so that you will have an appointment on your calendar, so you'll get that alert. You know, for those of us that are up there pretty much all day, it helps to keep us organized. That is for sure. So that's really how the bill tracking system and how to find bills. Hopefully that's been helpful for everyone to see how to do that. Again, just from the legislative branch, their home page. This is probably my biggest beef right now, and I've mentioned it to them, is I actually have to go over here and scroll to the bill tracking system to click on this link. They do not have a link anywhere else to get to that login. They should, I mean, it should be like bold, front and center, every page, log into bill tracking. But I digress a little bit. We'll get there. We'll work with them on that. So going back now, talking about engagement. So we've now figured out how we're going to track our bills, what we're going to do there. But now we need to know, how are we going to be engaged? It's great to just sit at home, read the bills. If you've got insomnia, with some of them it works really well. Others are interesting, but how do we get engaged? That's really why we're probably wanting to track a bill. So we need to contact our legislators. We need to testify at hearings, and also work with lobbyists. So within the contacting legislators, I'm going to flip back to the website. There are a couple of ways to do that. Obviously, I showed you if we go into the assembly, I can find my members. You know, let's just do members by district. There's District 1. You know, Williston's number 1, obviously. So I can find Brad, Pat, Gary, and click on them, click on each of their individual. I can see Brad has listed his cell phone. Some of them do, some of them don't. So you can contact him by that, and then his email that he gets as a legislature, as a senator. So you can just click on that and send him an email. Another way that you can contact them is actually through the home page. There is this nifty little one too, contact my legislators. If I click on this, it gives me the option here, contact a lesson. If I just want to send a general note, hey, you're doing an awesome job, I can send a message. If I want to send a viewpoint, if it's about a bill, I can click on here, send a viewpoint. It requires information, your first name, address, city, state, zip, and then it will actually, I'm just going to fill out here. So we're just going to select an address. It shows me that I am now in District 1. Now, these fields are required. Your name and address are required. Your home telephone is required. So that they know that you are one of their constituents. That's really what that's about. So then if I know that bill number, just putting in a random number, I can tell them, I want you to vote yay on the bill. And then I can check who I want to send it to. Maybe it's just in the Senate, so it doesn't make any sense to send it to Gary and Pat right now. I can type a message and send it to them. So I will tell you from personal experience and talking to the legislators, they prefer you to email them directly through their email address that's within their profile, their nd.gov email. This works. It's obviously a very easy way to do it, but if they see a personal email from an individual, that is going to rank higher, and they will all tell you that they will look at those emails and they prioritize those emails based on, are they one of my constituents first and foremost? That is number one. And that's why sending that personal email makes a big difference, or contacting them, emailing them, texting them, whatever works for you in that regards. So that's how we can contact our legislators. You can look them up, you know them. One of the other ways, a lot of times what you're going to want to wind up doing with a bill is contacting the committee members when there's a hearing. So when you're tracking that bill, you're going to see that bill is in, we'll say Senate IBL. So I can go to the Senate committees, industry, business, and labor, and there's my members. And so I can just go through those members, get each of their email addresses, and send an email to that committee. You know, that's committees obviously are where the hearings are heard, so that's a great way to let them know your opinion, because they are the ones that are going to make that recommendation to the floor. So after we know who we're contacting, another way to stay engaged, especially at the committee level, is to testify at those hearings. Now, there are two ways that we can testify. One of them is verbal testimony. I've got in here just some highlights of, if you're going to come and do verbal testimony, just some basic ways to make sure that you have this in your mind beforehand, so when you get up to the podium, you don't get super nervous and forget everything. Is, first thing is to address the chair and the committee. So House Appropriations, for example, it's Representative Delzer as the chair. So I would stand up and say, Representative Chairman Delzer and members of the committee. My name is Brent Bogart. I represent the Greater North Dakota Chamber. And then I would say, on Bill 1, 2, 3, 4, the Chamber is in strong support and we urge a due pass. Keep your verbal testimony short and simple. If you have an example or a good detail that you want to share with them in regards to why you support this, we support this because it will help our community. I'll go back to last session. Obviously, I stood in front of Chairman Delzer. I support changing the gross production tax formula to get additional revenues to support the infrastructure needs of the counties and the cities in the oil impacted communities. And we provided more detail with that, but urged a strong support. And then when you're done, always thank them for the opportunity to share. Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity to speak. I would stand for any questions. Always make yourself available for questions. Quite honestly, as a lobbyist, I hardly get questions. It's when members of my group, like last session, when the city of Williston or Dickinson or McKenzie County, I would have them testify. And as a lobbyist, that's one of the things that we do is we organize our members to come and testify. Because the committee members don't want to hear from us. They tell us that all the time. They want to hear from the people it actually impacts. And so we organize that testimony. And so if they want to hear from you, they're going to have more questions for you. I mean, all you got to do is think back to last session, and I remember the questions that were asked of the city of Williston and Williams County, in McKenzie County, Watford City, Crosby, when they came to testify in support of the formula bill or the surge bill. I could have probably answered about 70% of those questions, but it's better that it's from the members that it's actually going to impact. So one thing with your verbal testimony, it can be written and you can distribute it to the members so that they have a copy of it. It's not required that that's the case. Sometimes people will just stand up and say, hi, my name is Jim Smith and this bill means a lot to me. I hope that you support it and pass it. And they may ask Jim why he supports it, and he'll go into some details, and then he'll sit down and there's nothing else to it. But he spoke up on the issue that was important to him. If you have a lot of detail, like if you want to include charts or, from the city of Williston's perspective, you want to include information in regards to growth and impact and debt servicing, you have that information, include that in a packet. You can put your written testimony on top of it and submit that. They really do not like going through 6 pages of charts and you going through all that detail. Highlight the summaries. I'm trying to help everyone out here. I know that it's a lot of information. You put a lot of time putting that together, and I get that. But they will ask questions of it. They will thumb through it while you're going through your verbal testimony. They will ask you questions about it. And believe me, you may think that they get a lot of stuff, but they do take the time to look through it, especially on issues when they have heard a lot of testimony. They know that it's important. They do take the time to look through that information. So that's verbal testimony, and I already kind of jumped into written testimony. You can just hand that out. There are a lot of times when a hearing is, there's a lot of testimony, and like from the chamber standpoint, I've got 6 members that have testified in support of a bill. Well, the chamber wants to be on record that we also support that. I'll have written testimony, but I will just hand that out, and that's it. So they've got that on the record. And when you go up to the podium to speak, there's a clipboard, and technically that clipboard is supposed to be passed around while the hearing's going on for you to sign in, and it has an option for you to say, do you support, do you oppose, or are you neutral on the bill? And you sign your name and who you represent, and that's another way to show support. And that supposed to go around the room. A lot of times it kind of gets forgotten on someone's chair or that type of thing. But then you can just hand out your testimony, you sign in that you've supported it, or like I said, you can hand it out in support of your verbal testimony. And here is just an example from last session that I used. This is a way to format written testimony. You know, put the date, who the chairman is, the committee, and what the bill number is. And then you address it, Chairman Delzer and members of the committee, introduce yourself. Written testimony should very much flow like what I said with the verbal testimony. You introduce yourself, your position, and then you can provide more detail. So that's how we can testify at those hearings. So it's not, and quite honestly, testifying at the hearings is not as scary as you might think. They're not going to bite your head off. They are North Dakota citizens just like you and I are. They may, depending on the issue, they may have some hard questions for you. But if you're standing up there to support something, you should be able to defend your position. I mean, if you feel that strongly about it, you should be able to take those hard questions. So the last part to work with is lobbyists. Obviously, I'm a lobbyist, have been for the last 2 sessions. Your lobbyists are in organizations, we're there when you can't be there. You know, if like we have members out in Williston, the Greater North Dakota Chamber has a number of members that are out in Williston. They may not be able to make it down for a committee hearing or an issue. They can contact me to find out, okay, what's really happening with this? Do I need to do something? And so we're kind of the foot soldier for everyone else down here. We understand the process. That's why today I was happy to do this for Williston Economic Development and everyone else, is to explain a little bit of the process, but we've been around the game a little bit more and can help navigate that, even just in helping to align testimony. If you have a lobbyist organization that you're part of, you know, whether it's the North Dakota Chamber or the Williston Chamber or, you know, the oil and gas counties or whatever, League of Cities, they can also help you to draft your testimony. That's what they are there for. We will help you write testimony to be clear on the points. Last session, I did a lot of helping our members of the oil and gas counties write testimony so that we didn't have overlapping testimony. If I had 3 counties testifying on the bill, I didn't want all 3 of those counties testifying about road impacts. I would make sure that one county testified on the roads, one county testified on trying to find employees, and another county testified about the law enforcement stresses that were there, so that each one of them is hitting a different point so that you're not belaboring the point. Because if the committee hearing gets really long and everyone is just standing up and saying the same thing, you will start to see eyes roll. You will see it in the audience, and you'll see some of the committee members just can't help themselves. So we also can organize that support when you have an issue, when there's something out there, whether support or opposition, just depending on what the bill. And you can see here, I listed a couple of organizations out there, your local chamber, the Greater North Dakota Chamber, the Association of Counties, and the League of Cities. You know, League of Cities and the Association of Counties, they are strong voices for their members. They have, the Association of Counties has, I believe, 6 lobbyists registered this session. The League of Cities has 3 lobbyists registered, and they are tracking this, and they'll reach out to their members in regards to, hey, you know, just like I wound up doing this already this week. We had an issue on a tax bill, and I sent an email out to our members saying, hey, members, they need to hear from not just me as the chamber, individual members. And I have heard from a number of committee members that they are getting lots of emails from those individual businesses regarding the issue. And so it does make a difference for you to contact them, and it does make a difference, you know, if you are part of an organization and they make a call to action or say, hey, we need your voice heard on this. Sending those emails, you might not be able to get down to Bismarck, but sending them to that committee or to your local representatives is a big thing. With that, I will wrap it up.
Well, Brent, on behalf of the Williston Regional Economic Development, I would like to thank you for presenting to us